Thanks, Grace. So welcome everybody to this panel on SenseAI. So how is AI used in learning worldwide? My name is Rebecca Marrone. I'm a research fellow from the Centre for Change and Complexity in Learning at UniSA. I have a fantastic group of panellists with me this evening if you're in Australia, or as Grace just mentioned, morning over in Europe. I'm going to start with introducing people briefly, then I'll kick it over to them to introduce themselves and give a brief overview of the project. But just to introduce our amazing panel members, we have Professor Shane Dawson, Executive Dean and Professor of Learning Analytics at the University of South Australia. So Shane's research focuses on the use of social network analysis and learner ICT interaction data to inform and benchmark teaching and learning quality. That is taken directly from Shane's profile at UniSA. We also have Dr. Melissa Bond, lecturer in digital technology education at UniSA, and a guru at systematic reviews, and she's going to be taking us through the current systematic review we're conducting at the moment on the state of AI in education. And then finally, we have Professor Maarten Laat, co-director for the Centre for Change and Complexity in Learning, and his research focuses on learning and value creation in social networks. If you just came from the other panel, you would have heard quite a bit of information and exciting stories and examples of the AI playground, which is another area that Maarten works in. So today's panel is around SenseAI. I'm just going to actually drop a link in the chat, and this is going to have a link to the website where we've got some research on this panel and on a bit of the work that we're doing in this space. But basically, we're going to be talking about SenseAI, and it's the largest and most complete study of how AI is actually being used in learning. It's a global multi-year study assessing AI adoption and planning approaches in K-12, higher education and corporate learning. The project also focuses on the technology companies and offerings that are being made to the education sector. This panel will provide insights and findings from the first year of the study. So to throw over to my panel members, can I please just have a brief introduction of yourself and then a little bit what the project has looked like in your context. So Mel, if it's okay, I'll throw it over to you. I know you've got some slides on this as well. So yeah, if you just want to kick it off for us.
No worries. First of all, a big hello to you from here in Ghana country. Here in Adelaide, I want to pay my respects before I begin to elders past, present and emerging. Yeah, absolutely thrilled to be here. Great to see some of the names there in the participants list as well, and a big shout out to those people who are my former colleagues. So as Beck said, my name's Mel. I am a lecturer in digital technology education. And one of my main passions is actually in evidence synthesis. So my role in the SenseAI project is to lead a FAB team on actually looking at AI in education, but looking at it from quite a meta view. Given the proliferation of evidence synthesis, secondary research, so things like systematic reviews, meta-analyses that have been published more and more, particularly in the last 5 years, we decided that we really needed to, in order to gain more of an understanding, we needed to look at it more broadly. So we're doing a tertiary scoping review, which is basically a review of reviews, or a meta review if you like. And we're seeking really to explore how the research has developed over the past 5 years. So looking at things like journals, geographical distribution and disciplinary affiliation. We're looking into the applications and the main topics that have been talked about within these types of reviews, as well as the types of synthesis that have been conducted. So looking at, are they meta-analyses or are they bibliometric studies, for example? We're going to be looking at the quality of the syntheses that are happening, and we're also going to look at seeing if we can identify the research gaps that these other reviews have already identified and try and synthesize those. Sort of make it a one-stop shop in a way. So the way that we're going to do that, we're going to use this methodology to map the literature and identify these key concepts and the gaps in the research, with a really key goal to reduce research waste, make sure that we are all undertaking research that is valuable and needed, and so that we are having a look at some of the things that really, I suppose, as I said, where there are gaps in the literature and that need to be looked at. So we're using the typology of artificial intelligence that Savaki Richter, my colleague, and other colleagues that we came up with. We're slightly adapting that because we're also looking at studies that have undertaken more bibliometric approaches. In terms of what we're going to include, we've decided to include secondary research as long as it has a method section. So any kind of evidence synthesis with a method section indexed in these 3 large databases, as well as snowballing from the identified secondary research. We have adapted the search string from that initial AI in higher education review, as well as one that I've been doing with other colleagues on different types of evidence synthesis in educational technology and language bias. We ended up with quite a considerable number. And if you just think about this, this is secondary research. These aren't primary studies. These are already reviews of primary studies. So there is a lot out there, and this kind of backs up our approach, really. So far, we've already screened on full text. We've got 100 that we've already started extracting data for, and we've already excluded 76 on full papers. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to giving you a little bit of an insight into that in a little bit. I think probably you want to hear from other people first. But in terms of analysis and synthesis, we're going to be doing that through a narrative approach, as well as tabulation and computer-assisted content analysis using LexiMancer. We'll also be producing some interactive evidence gap maps, as well as an openly accessible web database, which is going to allow any researcher in the world who's wanting to have a look at how other secondary research has been undertaken, the search strategies, the search strings, everything's going to be there, openly accessible in one place so that you're able to see and able to use that in order to further your own research. And in terms of quality assessment, looking at potentially using the 2 different types of Prisma. The Prisma SCR is for scoping reviews, but also maybe considering using the DARE criteria. So that's the approach in a nutshell. I might leave it there, Berg, and if you wanted to come back to some interesting findings we've come across already in a bit, then I can do.
Sure, thanks for that, Mel. Sorry, I should have mentioned at the start, if anybody has any questions throughout, please put them in the chat and I'll monitor the chat. And if you've got other questions that you're posting in Hoover, that's totally fine. Shane, I might kick it over to you. What has the SenseAI kind of teachers or leadership perspective on this project looked like thus far?
Yeah, thanks, Beck. So I'll just flag and say that I contribute nothing to the team, so other than charm and sense of humour. So please direct all your questions to other more knowledgeable people as we go on here. But the leadership aspect. So I think my I guess lens is into the SenseAI is really how we mainstreaming and adopting complex systems, complex tools like AI into our current system structures, and how do leaders respond to that. So I think there's a key gap in how AI is currently being looked at in the K-12 and education sector more broadly. At the moment, it's very tool-driven and looking to replace or augment current systems or pieces within a larger system, rather than shift the way that we actually work. So I think that will come about very, very quickly. In terms of the teaching processes, then again, there's a lot of work to do there. The teaching workforce hasn't strongly focused on the role of digital technologies. And when we had the COVID situation, we saw in the K-12 very rapid push for developing up those skills, and that's still growing. So it's still very nascent in a lot of areas around teacher understanding of the way that different digital tools can be applied in education. So at the moment, there's a perception and maybe a misperception that it is very much a change in work to the detriment of someone's workload. So it's seen as an add-on rather than a replacement that can enhance work and more better position the teacher into more valued activities in the class. And again, I think as we build up more understandings of the different technologies that are being deployed in schools, I think the way that learners interact with those tools and the data and offshoots of that, will see an increase in the way that that is analysed. And as George had noted even in the keynote this morning, where there's data, there's analytics, where there's analytics, machine learning and AI is very soon to follow. And I think that's where we'll see those efficiency gains in administration and workload options, which then will see a shift in the way that we will view teaching processes. So it'll be very much around a facilitation aspect and very much an understanding around what is a personalised, where's the areas of misconception or development that a individual student learner requires, and it'll be redirection and building and ensuring that there's capabilities and content and activities that are I guess designed specifically for that individual. So there will be a shift. And I'm really looking forward. I don't think we're too far off, definitely before I pass away, because I aim to live to about 150, so I'm sure I'll see it in. And I'm currently 30, so I've got a good space of time there to get there. No one said this had to be truthful, did they? So all right, we're off. So I think I'm keen on the day that we actually we can remove the assessment structures. And I think we are getting closer around having the capabilities of doing it, where every task that we're asking student is an assessment task where there's feedback and activities provided, which then is assessment on their capability of what's the next step. And we're seeing that very much in maths, and there's lots of different math tools and things at the moment around how that's taught. There's around my local area, definitely things like Math Pathways is an area where it is growing and growing, mapped to curriculum, so that we can actually have base understandings and then every student gets a direction. It's not exactly, at this point in time, a sophisticated model, but it is starting to shape what the teacher is doing. And then we've now got to look at how we're actually developing up the thinking skills and processes. But that individualized learning and that assessment points, every activity is effectively an assessment, which then generates the next piece of curriculum that a student would undertake. So there is a small shift, and I think that will just increase over the next 5 years, around how teacher changes to a more of a facilitator and an ongoing assessor and diagnostician, if you like, of an individual's learning processes. On the leadership side, there's definitely I would say right across from K all the way through into universities, a level of ignorance that we need to address. We know there's a tsunami of activity coming, but it's coming through in the voices of industry. It's not coming through in the voices of an education focus. And so we need a way in which we can start to manipulate the systems to ensure that, okay, there's good evaluation of these technologies as they're adopted to achieve the outcomes they're meant to. Otherwise, we'll see what's meant to be as, we can see a revisit of the glory days of the 1990s and 2000s when we had learning management systems, and we just kept shoving more into a learning management system, and that was seen as the more features it had, obviously the better it had to be for student learning. That's not where we want to go back to. We want to make sure that the tools and adoptions are established that meet the context, community, and the individual requirements of the university, school sector, or early years, as we've seen. So there are things that come through. I think what surprises me is, I think, in what we're sort of learning through these processes, Beck, you're probably best to talk about that because you're wedded into the development of learner profiles, so I hope you're going to talk about that, is that how much we're still only playing on the fringes of tools, and we haven't really seen anything that just reshapes a system or really gives a system a bit of a nudge there to be different, to work through different policies, different practices, different teaching models. We're still looking at things like chatbots. We're looking at things like faster ways to do grading. It's not changing grading. It's not changing the way the task is set. We're looking at replacing administration, or we're looking at replacing assessment processes. So, and I think there's a lot more space and value that we can bring into with AIs and AI and machine learning processes. I'll park it there as well.
Thanks, Shane. I'll come back to a couple of those points that you mentioned a little later, but Maarten, can you please just give a little bit of your background and a little bit of first year, I guess, conclusions from the SenseAI business side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Rebecca, for the opportunity to do so and be part of this wonderful panel. So in terms of the SenseAI business, so the whole idea of the SenseAI project is to get a better understanding of how people appreciate or understand the use of AI to support learning and knowledge processes. And like the other panelists already have said, we are looking at different areas, and the one that I'm particularly targeting with the team that I'm working with here is around the use of AI in the business sector or in the corporate sector, basically. And it sort of fits with our research on understanding professional learning in networks and communities in the workplace. And we are interested in how networks become a constellation of human and non-human intelligence, and how this changes how we think about the use of technology and the adoption of technology to support learning and creative processes, so to speak, within organizations. So the current interest, I think, within the scope of our projects is about the adoption of AI in corporate sector for the support of learning and professional development. And we'd like to position this in the larger framework of lifelong learning, capability development, and organizational learning. Now, those are big questions, so to speak. And I think what Shane is already saying is like we have these sort of bolder statements and bolder understandings of AI, but when you look under the hood, it sort of becomes quite narrow in the terms of what AI actually is and does, and in a way that's still very exciting. But I think we need to keep those two perspectives in balance, so to speak. And in our project on the SenseAI in businesses, we were conducting a literature review similar to what Melissa has been talking about, but also we're planning to develop or adopt a survey and engage in interviews with business leaders. And the whole idea is to target, say, index 500 companies. So we were targeting large companies, and the reason for that is that if we want to conduct interviews and surveys on a more global scale, it's probably quite easy to use that as a benchmark to select, if you like, comparative companies across the globe. Now, the interesting thing of that, of course, is that most of these countries or a lot of these companies are already operating at a global level. So it might be quite interesting to sort of see how they actually use AI to spend, if you like, the group dynamics problem of all of that, like teamwork and team learning and things like that. We probably might want to get to the findings a little bit later, but basically what we're trying to target here is companies in the US, in Europe, Asia, including Australia and New Zealand, and if we can branch out to other continents as well.
Thanks, Maarten. Just following up on that in regards to the survey and interviews, what are you hoping to kind of find, or what are you hoping to kind of ask these, top companies around the world? What do you kind of, what's the plan for the interviews and the surveys?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've done a study on the adoption of learning analytics amongst business leaders, and really interested in what business leaders say about the use of learning analytics. And this study is a bit of a follow-up on not so much about what business leaders say about learning analytics, but what do they say and think about when it comes to AI. And I think it would be really interesting to get a good perception of how they see the world of AI and how that gets realized then in the context of their organization, because I think that's quite a gap that we don't know a lot about, particularly from the literature review. You see some broad scope studies which are often more theoretical or scoping views or white paper type kind of stuff about big systems and AI supporting knowledge processes. But then if you really dig deeper and to see how companies are actually doing it, it's more of a struggle, I guess, or even a lack of understanding. So what I really like from this study or this approach is that we put a stake into the ground at this stage and then do follow-ups over the years to come and really start benchmarking, if you like, the adoption and the development of AI over time. So I think that can have a huge contribution to make to understand sort of that balance between the practical use of AI and the promise of AI, and of course what's being dealt with in more computer science research and the promise of the AI, so to speak. And at some point we will see the cycle complete, and that the promise has been delivered, so to speak. And I think that would be quite exciting to see when that's happening.
Definitely. Mel, I'd like to come back to you. What are the reviews of the reviews saying? What's practical use? Are we still seeing promises? What are we seeing so far?
Nah, I've done it.
And no acronyms, Melissa. Sorry.
Yes, no, I will try and avoid that. I get so excited I can't help myself. I forget. I do want to premise this by saying that we're still very much in the early stage of data extraction, simply because we were spending quite a large amount of time ensuring that we had our integrated reliability on point. Because we had quite a few people involved in the team, and the more people you have, you know, the more cooks in the kitchen, you need to make sure everything's copacetic. So, but we are finally getting to this point, which is awesome. So hopefully you can see my slide on the screen there with some of the key findings. Now, this is based on the first 100 reviews that we've got in this corpus. We've got roughly 150, I think, to go, or maybe just a little bit under that. But this is what we've got so far. So predominantly they're journal articles with only 8% conference proceedings. I was actually disappointed for some reason that only 69% of them are open access, but I suppose I should still be thankful. That's still, you know, pretty good. The majority of them I found quite surprising were systematic reviews, and then there was at least 20% that were looking, conducting more sort of bibliometric, scientometric studies, and there were only a very small amount of meta-analyses. And for some reason, I was a bit shocked because I had it in my head that perhaps because this is a more sort of computer sciencey type area, that maybe there would be more number crunching and things like that. But there's a lot more sort of thematic analysis of, you know, a lot of these studies. Most of the author teams are 2, 3 or 4 people. And it was pleasing to see that the most of the first authors, the highest percentage in terms of discipline where these first authors are primarily based was actually education, which was a finding we didn't find when we did that AI in higher education review in 2019. And if you have a look at this graph here, which shows you there has been an exponential number of reviews that have been published, especially in the last couple of years, I think this is a positive sign in the field that more people who are in education or have a background in education, more of them are doing some of this synthesis work. I also found it quite interesting that 66% of the articles, sorry, the reviews that we've coded so far are domestic only. Now that means that it could be 2 or more authors from the same country collaborating together. They may or may not be at the same institution, but they're certainly located within the same country. There were only, around 10 off the top of my head that were international, and then there were a little bit more that were both domestic and international. But I kind of expected maybe with, you know, with reviews and with especially the last couple of years that we've had, where there's been a little bit more of a shift towards online learning in terms of work in all kinds of different ways. Perhaps I had thought there might be a little bit more in terms of international work. In terms of the countries for these first 100, we're looking at US followed by China, Hong Kong. I have coded Hong Kong separately as which, you know, rightly or wrongly. Some journals put that as within China and some don't, so I've coded it separately. And then followed by Taiwan, which I found also fantastic. Oops, wrong way. And that's whether or not, the other thing I wanted to show you just briefly, if I share another screen, I'll just zoom in a little bit. This is a one of the interactive evidence gap maps. Now this is it's not very pretty. It was only hastily put together, but this is a little bit of an idea about the kind of AI that we're looking at. If we consider the typology of AI in terms of profiling and prediction, assessment and evaluation, adaptive systems and personalization, and intelligent tutoring system. And then I also added the ones that were really focusing heavily on bibliometric information. So things like the top journals, the top authors, citations and things like that, as well as reviews that were saying they were looking at artificial intelligence in education in general. They didn't specify a particular type. They just said they were going to be looking at everything. And I think given the larger the bubble, the more studies there are, and I've separated them into open access and behind a paywall. And I think you can really clearly see where there aren't any reviews being done. So there was a lot less in assessment and evaluation than I expected, and a lot less in intelligent tutoring systems than I expected. And I should just say that where we've coded any or unclear, that either means that the reviewers did not specify that they were focusing on one particular educational level. Perhaps they were just looking at education in general, it didn't matter what happened, or they didn't mention at all what kind of education level that they were looking for. And so that's why there's a larger amount there. But I just thought I'll show you something visual, and we'll be creating a lot more interactive, cool stuff that you'll be able to play around with in the future, but there's a little brief snapshot for you there.
Thanks, Mel. That's really interesting insights to see that there is no reviews or very little reviews happening in the assessment and evaluation space. Shane, I'd kind of like to throw that to you. You mentioned before that a lot of the work or a lot of the conversations in AI and education and with leaders are around chatbots or around making assessment quicker, or how can we make grades quicker. But if we're not seeing that necessarily come through in the reviews, where's the either disconnect? Is that what teachers want? Is that what media is talking about? Do leaders want something else? What's your opinion or view on this? You just muted there.
In my defence, it's really late at night for me. I'm usually in bed. It's coming up to 8 o'clock. Sorry. It's a really good question, Beck. And I think it's a lack of understanding of where things fit at the moment. So there is a lot of it. At the same time, I said that people are looking for tools. They're also exploring. And I think George Siemens is probably best placed with his conversations he's had with multiple school leaders and university leaders and industry now through the development of some of the work he's been doing in C3L and also through Grail. So I think the key aspect there is, I think there's a lot of misconception and lack of understanding of what AI can and can't do. And there's a lot of hype in the industry. So around, obviously, what's the benefit that AI can play in the education space? Right? So we'll see things around sort of text analysis, and there are good tools out there. Like I was looking at one the other day around feedback fruits, which I think Deakin Universities are using, and they've presented a paper at Ascalite on that most recently around how they can support feedback literacy using automated tool processes using text analysis. But I think it's that level of understanding then, but what does that look like in the school sector, right, where students are using a pen and paper? And obviously the text analysis and the ease of access to data in those situations is far, far less. So then it does fall back into things that we have digital data for. So let's record attendance easier. Let's do prediction of NAPLAN scores or standardized testing scores. Let's look at some other artifacts. And as I said, math is probably the easiest space where you could play with. Right? So it's an area where we can actually map things really clearly. So if you don't know basic arithmetic, then you're not going to be able to jump into algebra. If you don't know order of operations, you can't do algebra, right? So, or complex algebra. So it's a way in which you can measure and have, in essence, a very, very basic computed curriculum going forward. So I think the leadership space and why there's a lack, I think it does fall back then as vendors come forward, it's a solution that's offered. And we know that suppose like Microsoft has a big push in schooling sector. We know that Google's playing in those spaces. Apple has long held an ambition in education. So they're big companies that are trying to also find their spot, but that's the conversation then that happens in those areas. I think it's also the venue at which, yep, true. I think it's also the venues at which different people go. So why there's a lack, teachers don't necessarily go to research papers to understand. Principals don't go to research papers. They go to magazines, they go to ed tech venues, they go to their own school conferences and so on. I'm just going to read that question. You mentioned who you are talking to within any particular studio. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I completely agree, Simon. So yes, yeah, there's always a VC or a provost or a DVC out there, or a PVC who had a chat with someone, and this is the greatest thing that could revolutionise. And simple things like you think of the way learning analytics also played a role here and how it unfolded. That this is a similar trajectory. It was very nascent. We had very simple research questions as the field exploded. Then we got more and more complex tools. We got more and more complex data sets. We got more and more complex ways of measuring learning, which then moved on from a static grade to trying to measure what you're doing, Beck, is the complex capabilities like creativity. So I'm going to throw a question back to you, because you're working with a school now that is leading in sort of the establishment of learner profiles with your work with Dr. Vidomir Kovanovic and yourself. How do you measure creativity, and do you see that as a space for AI to measure complex capabilities in a school?
Thanks, Shane. Thanks for taking my job here. Plug for tomorrow morning's panel, Australian time, where we're actually talking about Professor David Cropley is hosting a panel on the role of AI and creativity. So we will unpack that further. But to Shane's point, yes, I do think AI can start helping with the assessment of some of those critical competencies like creativity. We've demonstrated recently, just by using Google's Teachable Machine, that a completely valid empirical assessment of creativity, a drawing task that is quite widely used in the field of creativity, which takes, 25 minutes for a human to score. We've been able to train an algorithm that's as successful as a human judge to score in a fraction of the time. And so what we can offer to schools is quick, flexible, dynamic assessments of some of these critical competencies. And so that's a drawing task, but what we're starting to do is measure these things in subject-specific domains, so a science creativity measure, a science critical and creative thinking measure, and so forth. And we'll be using that information, I guess, to build out student learner profiles, which is what Dr. Vidomir Kovanovic is giving his keynote on, which will be very, very exciting. But we're taking it, I guess, beyond some of those stereotypical ideas of what AI can do, the very narrow, helping with, facilitating administration, grades and so forth, and starting to measure some of those more complex competencies, but also some of those more well-being measures. There's some really exciting research happening in this space as well. So please join us tomorrow morning to unpack this, and definitely tune into Vida's keynote on this, because he's going to be giving some really detailed insights into work in this space. So did I answer your question, Shane?
You did exceptionally well, Becca, as always. Can I just flag one other point in? So we've focused on schools, we've focused on university, but I didn't talk about the department. And I think that's an area where there's a lot of obviously, when you run large systems, so I think if you look at even in South Australia, over 1,000 schools sitting in that area, you want things that are scalable, measurable, consistent and transparent to all that are involved in there. So there are spaces where AI can be involved. But again, when you try and fragment down, we don't really have the right data set for even to work at the department level. So they're getting sort of these very consistent but annual large chunks of data on a learner. We need to get into the space, obviously, where we're getting that very fine-grained granular data. So I think where does AI start to have a play when you're looking at systems from a more holistic level and how that's deployed? And I think even some of the areas there where you could have a big place to play is on workforce capability. Where are we projecting where there's deficiencies or we're going to have a drop in workforce numbers of teachers or skilled specialists in certain areas? And that's an area we should be able to address really quickly, so the department could actually structure things as incentives to make sure that we've got a consistent supply of teachers in the right areas based on the needs that we have in there.
Thanks, Shane. So Maarten, if it's fragmented data sets in large organisations like the Department for Education, What are we seeing at the business level? What are some of the key findings that are coming out of your initial research into these spaces?
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I was actually thinking when Shane was talking that fragmentation is also part of perhaps being a bit too early. If AI is not largely adopted in the sense that we're thinking about, it's also hard to then, of course, collect the data sets to understand how it's being used and to what extent. So please keep in mind that I think what we're doing here is still quite early on, but at a large scale, taking that sort of global perspective on understanding where things are now. And I think what we see in the business sector is quite similar to what I've heard from the other panelists here, Shane and Melissa and yourself as well, Rebecca, is that from the literature review, for example, there are many, many papers talking about AI in the business sector. It's like overwhelmingly, but a lot of those papers are also like written from a computer science perspective. And it's all about how we can advance the AI. So they're interested in the AI system rather than the AI application, or what the application in the context might mean and how it might change how we experience or anticipate work in the future. So I think that's quite an interesting point to take on board. Lots of other papers, like what Shane was saying as well, it's supporting the primary work and making things, if you like, more efficient in the admin spaces. And a lot of papers also address, if you like, the customer focus. So how can AI enhance customer services? How can AI enhance the customer engagement from a company perspective? Now, all of these things, especially the customer focus, can have an angle on learning and professional development just simply by how does AI improve how our employees are actually interacting with customers, for example. But those are not necessarily questions that are being addressed in those papers. So again, I think there is a bit of a research gap there as well to start understanding how actually AI is changing how we think about learning and knowledge processes in organizations and how can that be supported. Now, some of the papers talk about that adoption space, and it's interesting to see that they are directed sort of at the level of managers and senior leaders in the organization, as well as the human resource department. And then it's all about creating that awareness. So it's about encouraging knowledge sharing about AI processes and AI possibilities or AI adoption in the organization, just to make people aware what current AI technologies are being used for and what they are capable of, but also team that up with information about job design and role expectations now and going forward. So what does the future workforce in the company look like? And of course, that future workforce then is that how is that impacted by AI and how can we anticipate that and what sort of changes might that mean? So it's a lot about providing the right kind of information in order to anticipate, and one could say it's about building trust in AI or building the acceptance of AI, if you like. And also it's about understanding and evaluate, if you like, the current skill sets. So how AI literate is the company, so to speak, what are people's anticipation or expectation of AI, their understanding of AI, the ability to actually work and use AI. Those are the kind of things that are really important. Now, some more specific things that you find in the literature are often very well related to human resources and talent development, but also recruitment. And I think that's what Shane was also referring to a little bit, understanding sort of what is the future workforce like and what are the skills and capables that we need, but also how they go and you go about using AI during, if you like, the interview process. So engaging interviewees in a game-based simulation environment and start collecting lots of data about how they respond, test cognitive abilities, personality, endurance, emotional intelligence, and all these kind of things that are just picked up through their engagement. And it's an advanced form of learning analytics and using AI to really try and dig deeper in the person that you're trying to hire. And they're also talking about sort of advancing training, providing with the constant learner content based on needs, help assess capability and stuff like that. So those are sort of in a nutshell what we have seen in the literature review so far. And some of these things we see echoing back in some of the interviews that we have been doing. And those interviews have mostly been sort of in the finance sector at the moment. So, for example, an insurance company. And basically what they are doing, they have a data team that is deliberately, I guess, put outside of the scope of human resources just to have a very fresh understanding of the role of data within the organization. So it's a centralized unit that connects with all the other departments, but it's an independent unit in that it can drive its own agenda. And out of that interview came across the idea of how AI can start helping sort of the end-to-end process by adopting smarter training opportunities to develop skills in the workplace that are actually based on performance in the workplace as well. So trying to map learning and organizational outcome is not an easy thing to do, but that's what they're trying to do. So basically what they're trying to map is the kind of knowledge and expertise that are required, if you like, within the company, and also map that then with the current ability. So how capable are our staff members in relation to that kind of knowledge that is required. Map that with the job skill requirements, so what is actually expected of them, and map that against performance. And they go through that cycle of prediction and scoring people's behavior, and based on that they kind of build a kind of a worker profile, maybe, so to speak, to understand, does the current worker for the position that he or she is in, do they have the required expertise? Do they have the capability to actually perform in such a way? And does it map with the job skill requirements, or do we need to adjust them because of the changing working environment? And map that against the performance of their behavior in the workplace. So I think that's quite an interesting sort of roundabout way to sort of see, okay, how can AI and analytics in this particular case as well help support understanding sort of what is required, needed, and expected in the workplace, and adjust people's performance based on providing additional training or connections in the workplace, that you start teaming up with other people that match the required expertise that is needed for within your team, for example. So I thought it was quite an advanced sort of example of how they were thinking about how AI can actually adopt going forward in talent management and talent planning, but also crafting the workforce that you need going forward. Another example was an interview with a Chamber of Commerce, and they were particularly in the professional sector, and they were very much embracing AI for their clients is maybe a strong word here, but at least they look after an entire sector, and they provide lots of training and reskilling opportunities, also providing information for the technology sector in particular. And the kind of AI that I'm thinking of working on mostly is first one is all about what is AI. So really providing information and engaging with the people to provide their understanding or update their understanding of AI and what AI is all about. Secondly, it's about talking about the capability and opportunity for AI in the workplace. So again, it's that mapping. So going from an understanding of AI to then also understanding how AI is actually being integrated in the workplace. And the third one is building AI literacy, and that's then really job specific. So in the automotive industry, for example, there are already lots of AI tools and instruments that people use or work with in the garage, so to speak, in order to measure fault systems in cars and stuff like that. And those AI tools are being updated almost constantly by the manufacturers. So keeping up with those kind of tools and how they are being used to perform in your work is a really important thing. But the interesting question then is sort of, okay, well, how, from a Chamber of Commerce perspective, how well are they actually adopting and using AI to support training and professional development? And there the answer was like, no, we haven't looked into that at all. They're not using data from the learning management system to analyze, the efficiency of the courses, or the kind of stuff that we're doing with learning analytics and AI in education. So again, it's quite an interesting sort of shift in terms of AI here and now in the workplace, but not so much focused on how AI can be used to advance learning and professional development or workplace learning, so to speak. Another one was more in the accountancy sector, and they're very interested in how use of technology can support the hybrid workplaces. And this is much out of COVID, because the way, the place and locations where people work has changed, and they want to understand sort of how can technology help advance working in these hybrid work and learning settings. But again, it's more about creating efficient workspaces rather than necessarily focusing on learning, even though there are some tools being used to adopt sharing knowledge and stuff like that. So, but that's more like your traditional, maybe not the right word, but like these engagement software like Teams and stuff like that. So I think that gives you quite a good overview in terms of what we have seen in interviews and literature reviews so far. You mentioned vendors. Now, we haven't really deeply looked into the vendors of particular systems and stuff like that, but in the corporate sector, the learning management systems, similar to education, they already provide a few options or AI solutions to help, that personalization of learning and stuff like that. And again, I have not so far have heard much about utilizing that kind of capability to keep on advancing the development and offering of training in the corporate sector. So far, what I've seen is that they're very much embracing the idea of online learning, but that's mostly sort of from a learning design perspective, but not so much from an enhancement perspective, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for that kind of comprehensive view of the research and your findings so far in this space. We've got a couple of questions coming in, and I'd like to get to them in a minute. I'll just open it to the three of you. If you can just think of maybe one thing that's been surprising from your perspective engaging in this first year of SenseAI projects, if there's anything at all, or if there isn't, then we can just kind of get to the questions that are coming into the chat. But has anybody come across anything that's surprising?
Yeah, I think for me it's been just the sheer number of reviews that have been done and how similar some of them are to each other. And yeah, I think that's probably been the biggest thing, just that people are only changing their designs just ever so slightly. And so we're not really necessarily getting more understanding. We're not really gaining much more insight into how AI is being, particularly how it's being implemented and how, it is actually being used. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, just the sheer number.
I think I'm going to draw on a bit of Carlota Perez's work and say, when things turn to absolute crap is when you actually get the push for a change in the way that we completely operate our systems, and it generates new levels of economies and so on, and government gets involved and everyone does. I think we'll see an explosion of AI driven by an individual level that will actually cause a reshift in the way that we actually operate education. I don't think it's going to be done. That'll force governments to rethink, and then we'll actually see that as a trickle down into the leadership processes and so on, and how AI is adopted. And part of that is we've seen, there's long been contract cheating and things like that. I'll just take a simple example around, outsourcing your assignment work. In the glory days of the 1950s when I went through study, if you didn't turn up to class, there was no class. Did it actually exist if you weren't there? So you had to rely on your friends, and then of course it was competitive, and I didn't really have any friends, which just meant you completely lost out. Now there's so many different ways of accessing that information, and of course, do you actually need to, or do you pay someone else to attend? So I think now we're seeing things like Chat GPT come through, right? So which is just writing your assignments for you. We're becoming editors of information that's being generated by an AI agent. There's no need to pay anyone anymore. Just go and install your OpenAI process and run it yourself. I think at the keynote that George Seamus did at AARE, the Australian Association for Research and Education recently, his first, which was fantastic, by the way. He did a stellar talk for the first 20 minutes. Post 20 minutes, it all fell down. But the first 20 minutes was actually written by the AI agent and actually made sense for once. When he then took over individually, we sort of lost track completely. So maybe it was cognitive load by that stage. But the first 20 minutes was literally written entirely by a product called Moonbeam, which is very, very impressive. And so it was really just around editing. So I can see that there'll be massive processes of this in the education space, which really will unsettle and, as I said, cause enough friction and enough fractures that we'll have to intervene and have policies and processes set up to look at how we work differently in this space.
Yeah, what I'm still a little bit surprised about in the stuff that we see going on in the corporate sector is that separation still between learning and development and how work gets done. You know, I think AI in terms of adaptive work and adaptive learning should be able to bridge those kind of units and really drive sort of a direct worker's experience and the learner needs in order to get the job done, so to speak, with just-in-time learning opportunities, or, you know, use AI to start recommend people you need to work with in order to overcome the knowledge gap that you currently have. So, you know, that whole idea of knowledge graphs and knowledge processing within organizations, I think could be a very interesting sort of space to look into. But so far, I haven't really come across it yet in the work that we're doing on this project. But, you know, maybe it's wishful thinking towards the future, but hopefully we'll we'll get there.
Thanks, Martin. Well, thanks, guys. I'll just draw our attention to a couple of the questions that are coming through the Q&A here. If anybody has any that we don't get to, I'll post them in Hoover as well. We can answer them there. So the first question from Mark Whitehorn: do you think that school communities and business leaders are reticent on uptake of AI tools after highly public stories such as the robo-debt Centrelink issue? So I guess for our non-Australian friends, a bit of context. Robo-debt was unlawful method of debt assessment.
just flag you're being recorded here.
Sorry for the government. As part of its Centrelink, so our welfare compliance program. So I'll put that out to everybody. Do we think that people are, I guess, maybe comfortable? School communities, business leaders, when we have some highly public stories of maybe AI not going quite right, if that's maybe the more politically correct way to structure that question.
I think there was a good example a few years ago with actually the start of COVID in the UK, when there was when they ran their model to actually predict who should or get entrance to university, which wasn't exactly a well thought out process, and we just found out there was all the rich kids got to go in, and it was sort of quite judgmental on other classes there or socioeconomic areas. So I think you could tie that in with probably Simon's question, to be honest, which is, I think it falls down into trust, really, and it's how it's been deployed. I think everyone seems, for some reason, trust the way that Google will steer you into I've got a little funny story. We'll steer you into the right space, right? Where do I get my directions? It says go left here, so you go left. We tend to trust it. There's a really, I was looking at an Airbnb the other day because it's coming up to Christmas and I've got to get away for a holiday and away from my colleagues at work. They're just really stressing me out, to be honest. So I was looking at various houses there and I was reading the comments, is this a good person to rent the house from and so on? And are they trustworthy? And one of the comments was, please do not trust Google's Google Maps to get you from the train station to the house. And so it took us an hour following the directions of Google, and we found out it's actually a 10-minute walk. Right, so I think that's where we do get into a bit of a trap of what areas do we, when it's a low stakes AI prediction, right? So we're not banking on university entrance scores, or we're not, it's computing a curriculum, it's making a recommendations, it's Netflix that says we think you'd like this movie, or it's Amazon saying you should probably buy this book. What the hell, they're low stakes. But when it says I think you've got cancer, that's when we probably want to have a second opinion, and that's where we don't trust. So when it's high stakes, we're not in that position there that we're actually looking at these things well. So I think how it gets deployed from low stakes into high stakes is going to be a very interesting process indeed. And just to Simon's question there around the studies about people's different responses to AI, there's actually a number of papers in the the upcoming Learning Analytics Conference. So stay tuned for that one, which is also looking at sort of trust and adoption of AI algorithms and outcomes and so on among different stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that high stakes, low stakes is a very good one. I don't think in the approaches that we have taken so far and in the interviews held, we have really come across those high stakes scenarios. So I think people at this stage are quite, embracing, I guess, and understanding what AI can do. And therefore it's a lot about providing information and making sure everybody gets on board, and even themselves, they're quite hungry in understanding AI and AI capabilities. So they may not even always fully understand or comprehend sort of what the system's capability is that they're currently using. Hence my point about sort of the learning management systems that are put in place in those companies that already have quite a bit of AI ready to use or being used without maybe even the full understanding and comprehension of it. And that makes me think of the particular paper from the Network Learning Conferences from a few years ago, 2020, that was about taking a more than human approach to understand the future of work. And that paper sort of talks about we need to start developing human and non-human intelligence narratives and perspectives into understanding the current and future situation and scenarios that we are engaging with. And taking that more than human approach will also therefore then start to normalize or democratize, if you like, the capability or the understanding of the capability of the AI systems at the moment. And I think those stories need to be told, and they need to be developed through research like this, but also through engaging with those kind of systems. And then, we can really start to unpack sort of what are the high and lower stakes going forward, and when we're actually entering in high stakes. Because if people are not conscious about sort of the kind of AI decisions that are being made by the systems they're using, how can you trust their decisions that are based on those decisions, so to speak? So it's really interesting how that integration is becoming more deeply intertwined, and being able to unpack that and creating more open or explainable AI systems that can create a better relationship to our contributions to the AI and how we actually co-develop the AI in those systems is really important to understand.
Can I just add a bit to that, Beck? Is that right? Sorry.
30 seconds. No, of course.
As if I could say anything in 30 seconds, can I only say my name in 30 seconds? But I think it's a really good point, and the context, and it probably explains why, well, we've seen a lot, right, where we've had the transferability of learning analytics from one institution to the next, and even just the transferability of research outcomes in one education setting into the next. It's really hard to get that replication and same level of impact or not. So it works in one class, it doesn't work in another, and we have those social dynamics. I think the same when we're thinking about trust in algorithms and trust in AI systems. It's clear that one size is not going to fit all. So everyone in the context of the community, the culture, the social dynamics of it, and so on, means that the level of risk and appetite for risk, or the appetite for adoption and flexibility and agility, is going to be different across all different settings.
Thanks, guys. So this kind of brings us to the end of our panel. I think we've got 30 seconds left. So I would just like to flag that this project is ongoing. I will drop the link again in the chat. So please watch this space. What we've spoken on today is the first year of the SenseAI project. We'll be putting some reports and some academic outputs in this space over the coming few months, but please keep looking at the Grail website. There's newsletters that you can sign up to there as well. But I would just like to thank Professor Shane Dawson, Professor Maarten Laat, or Shane's son, and Dr. Melissa Bond for joining us tonight. So thank you very much for your contributions and your work in this space, and looking forward to the second and third and fourth year outcomes of this project. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for hosting.
Thanks.
Wonderful work.
Thanks, Beck. You did a great job. Thanks, Mel. Maarten.
Thanks, guys.
See you
See you later.
Cheers.